Former middleweight title challenger Marvin Vettori has his next fight booked. He's going to be taking on Brendan Allen in the main event of UFC Fight Night on April 6th. And I think this is a fight that Marvin Vettori has to win if he ever wants to be a contender in the middleweight division again. And I'm going to explain that in today's video. But let's first start off with the fact that I love this matchup. I think this makes a ton of sense. And this is the exact type of fight they should be putting on Fight Night cards. 5-round main event between two guys trying to get to that contender spot. You know, Vettori's been there as far as who he's fought in the weight class. But this matchmaking also signals to me that the UFC is kind of like, look, you got to show us something here to Marvin Vettori because he hasn't looked so good in the last couple fights. And Brendan Allen is on a nice win streak, but hasn't maybe fought the competition that Marvin Vettori has in his career. And I think with Vettori, the one thing that was really evident in his last fight against Jared Cannonier is that he does not look like a contender right now. Cannonier absolutely dominated that fight. There was no point in that matchup where Cannonier was in any sort of danger or being finished, or I don't even think Vettori won a single round in this fight. This was an absolute beatdown against an opponent in Jared Cannonier who not only was an underdog, but also much older here at 39 years old. That was a test that Vettori did not pass. And we've seen this happen before as well. Robert Whittaker had a similar fight to Vettori back in 2022, where Whittaker again just took over the fight and dominated. And looking what Whittaker did in his last fight, not exactly a loss that has looked so good on Vettori's resume, considering Whittaker got finished just a few fights later. He gets the win over Roman Dolidze in a fight that I thought was really close, and I honestly think could have gone the other way. So I really think Vettori is needing to prove something here in this fight, and I think Allen is a good opponent for that. And I think the matchmaking also tells us as well that the UFC is kind of like, you got to show us something here to Vettori, otherwise it's going to basically just be matchmaking from here on out of him fighting up and comers. Remember, you heard the rumors of him fighting Shara Bullet. That would be the type of fight where the UFC is basically trying to build up the other guy. I could kind of see that in this situation as well, although at least in the rankings these guys are very close, but very interested in this. And I think the big thing for Vettori really is just breaking through. We haven't really seen one of those breakthrough performances in the last couple fights. Like Paulo Costa was a good win, but that was kind of a weird fight too, with the fact that Costa just during fight week is like, oh yeah, we're gonna fight at light heavyweight, not at middleweight. He looked good in that fight. Lost to Adesanya in a fight where, if you remember after the fight, he was kind of saying, oh, I got robbed, or I definitely thought I won that fight, which is just like, he's got to get people around him that can kind of explain that you did not win that fight. It was not a super exciting fight, but I don't think anyone really thought that Vettori won that matchup. He had a good run prior to him having the rematch with Adesanya, a nice win streak here, but not so great competition. It's when he got that step up that we sort of saw that, hey, I don't think he's a contender right now. And I think beating a guy like Brendan Allen and making a statement against him, maybe finishing him, I think is the exact type of thing that Marvin Vettori needs in his career. I know he's 30 years old, and I know there's going to be some people watching this video being like, James, what do you mean must win? He's only 30. Well, I'd argue this. He's in the prime of his career. He's had a number of opportunities against contenders where, like in the case of Whittaker and the case of Jared Cannonier, where it didn't really look competitive. Like, he didn't really do much. Vettori kind of reminds me a bit of where Curtis Blaydes is in the heavyweight division, right? He's had opportunities where you think he's going to get to a title. I guess in the case of Vettori, he has fought for a title. But what I mean is that he's in this spot now where they're kind of using him to build up other fighters, like they are with Blaydes, with him fighting Jailton Almeida. Same sort of thing here with Vettori. I think if the UFC had it their way, they'd want Allen to win, unless Vettori changes something drastic, because, like I said, the last couple fights have not been quite good. Now, with Brendan Allen, as far as what he has to prove, this, like I said, is a good step up for him. And here's an interesting thing in this matchup. You look at Brendan Allen's wins, and again, Brendan's just 2 years younger than Marvin Vettori here, but you look at all these wins, for the most part, they're all submission wins. Here's the thing about Marvin Vettori. If you look on his resume here, never been submitted, never been knocked out. So that'll be interesting here. Can Allen go out there in a 5-round fight and finish Marvin Vettori? If he does that, we got to start talking about Brendan Allen being in the title picture. And I'm dead serious about that, because no one's been able to finish Vettori. If he wins a decision or, edges out a close fight, then yeah, maybe we pump the brakes a little bit. But I think Allen has a tremendous opportunity here to go out there and finish a guy in Vettori who, like I said, has not been finished in the octagon. He's only lost decisions in his entire career. So I think for Allen, this is a really, really, really good spot for him to kind of prove things. Otherwise, and for Allen, I think people have kind of, warmed up to him now. There was a point where Allen, you didn't really know what you were getting in the prospect pool with Brendan Allen, because if you remember when he started his career, yeah, great win. Couple nice wins to start off his UFC career, Kevin Holland, Tom Breeze, and Kyle Dawkins. He had that fight against Strickland, which, granted, Strickland's the champ now. That's not a bad loss to have on the resume, but he got absolutely destroyed in that fight. Like, Strickland came forward, pressured him, and knocked him out. And then we saw a similar performance with his teammate Chris Curtis, which is a fight, looking back now, that Brendan shouldn't have really lost. And I know Curtis took that on short notice, I believe, I'm not mistaken. So really, Curtis had nothing to lose, and it was kind of a weird fight too because, again, Allen wanted to stay on the card, and he fought Curtis, who was unranked at the time. Curtis had everything to gain from that fight, and he certainly did by knocking out Brendan Allen. But that's sort of where Allen's, faltered a bit. But since then, he's gone on a nice run. Now, the only thing I'll say about his run here, Alvey not in the UFC, Malkoun, I guess, is a mainstay. Jocko not in the UFC. Muniz has really fallen off, although I remember at the time, a lot of people were on the Muniz side there. Bruno Silva is a good win. And then Paul Craig was a great win as well, in his last fight. And I think that's where people started taking notice that, hey, Brendan Allen could make a nice run to the title here. But if you're looking at this fight, just from a stylistic perspective, right, I think with Vettori, he's sort of average everywhere. He doesn't really excel in one particular area. With Allen, we know he's got the great ground game. And I honestly think Allen's success in the last couple fights really has a lot to do with the fact that he's been training at Killcliff FC. That seems like a great gym for him. A lot of good bodies in the gym that he gets to work with. And Vettori actually made a switch recently, not recently, a couple years ago, leaving King's MMA and going to Extreme Couture. I know he's had mixed results, but I guess the verdict's still out on if that's going to end up panning out for him or not. Eric Nixick is one of the best coaches in the game. So, Vettori's at least got good training partners. I mean, Vettori gets to train with Sean Strickland, so that's got to be a bit of a benefit. And I wonder if Strickland's going to give some game plan going into this fight with the fact that he finished Brendan Allen in that fight. But you see there, as far as on paper, Allen only 2 years younger, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. Marvin Vettori 6 feet tall with a 74-inch reach. So pretty similar overall. And I think it's a fight too where one fighter is going to win and break through and get into that contender spot. In the case of Vettori, if he goes out there and finishes Allen, he's right back where he was, I'd say, before the Cannonier fight, where we still think there's hope of him getting back to another title shot. With Brendan Allen, he's never been there. So this is a big fight for him to go out there and really prove his worth and show that this winning streak is not just the fact that he's beating maybe lesser caliber opponents, that he's actually ready for someone in the top 5. So that's why I think this fight makes a lot of sense. And I love this matchmaking, right? Like rankings wise, you're getting, number 5 and number 8. This is exactly what I like to see because I'm more of a purist as opposed to, hey, let's pick the most popular guy to fight whoever, right? So I think it's a big, big matchup for both. But getting back to Vettori, as we're going to kind of end this video here, I really do think he has to win this because if he loses, then you are going to see him fight your Shara Bullets and these other guys that don't have a lot of fights, and they're going to use Vettori to sort of build him up. I kind of feel like that's what this matchup is a little bit, but at least with Allen, he's fought in the UFC a bunch of times. I think this is just a crossroads fight where you got Allen, who's on a nice win streak, and you got Vettori, who's coming off a pretty dominant loss to Jared Cannonier in his last fight. And maybe I'm being a little bit hard on Vettori, but I just think that like the last couple performances, in particular the Whitaker and Cannonier fight, he didn't look competitive in those fights. And those were fights where both Whitaker and Cannonier took over the matchups. And that sort of showed, in my opinion, that Vettori's not a contender. He can prove us all wrong in this fight. If he goes out there and finishes Brendan Allen, he's right back in that driver's seat, in my opinion. So just to sort of reiterate here, I think Vettori has to win this if the UFC is going to look at him as a contender and continue to give him good opponents going forward. If he loses this, don't be surprised if the UFC, sort of gives him these up-and-comers like your Ikrams and these other guys that are sort of making their way through the UFC that only have a few fights. I could definitely see them going that route here because it's like, what are you really giving us at this point with Vettori? Like, to me, this is a fight that I think he's capable of winning, but it's also a tough fight in Allen, who, like I said, is catching him at a good time, where Allen's on this really good win streak, and he's looked very impressive in the last couple outings there. So that's my thoughts on this fight. I think Marvin Vettori has to win this fight if he wants to be a contender in the weight class. To be clear, I'm not saying Marvin Vettori loses this, he's going to get cut. I'm just saying that if Marvin Vettori wants to be a contender, there's only so long the UFC will let you hang around in that spot where you get those pivotal matchups. When you start losing key fights like this, that's when they're going to start giving you up-and-comers. And I think this is a good opportunity for Vettori to prove his doubters wrong. And conversely for Allen, this is the exact type of opponent I like to see him fight, the exact type of step up I'd like to see him fight. And if he goes out there and beats Vettori like Cannonier and Whitaker and Adesanya and all these other guys have, then he's going to be in that conversation of a contender. So kudos to the UFC. I know people have been, giving me some critiques on my criticisms of some of the UFC matchmaking, but this is a very good main event and the exact type of fight they should be putting on a fight night 4 or 5 rounds. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. What's your prediction for this fight as well? I want to hear your prediction. I want to hear what you think about this fight as a whole. Was this good matchmaking? Do you enjoy seeing this type of matchup getting put together? And do you think this is a must-win for Vettori in terms of him being a contender in the weight class? Would love to get your opinions on that in the comments. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.